Gentlemen, welcome to the General Government Budget Committee. Today, let's see, we've got a real light agenda today. I don't see any problems with this whatsoever. Yeah, wheels won't fall off this bus. All right. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good question. Do we have anyone on WebEx right now? As far as legislators? No. Okay. First things first, let's go ahead. I kind of liked the way that we did it yesterday of doing the final action first, and we didn't have any real time constraints on our informational briefings. And because we've got some neat informational briefings, let's go ahead and get started with the making our recommendations. We'll start off with the Department of Revenue. Analyst Dear, I understood you were like quadruple booked. Well, welcome to your respite.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion. Maybe not. There it is. I move that we pass out the Kansas Department of Revenue's budget for fiscal year 2022 and 2023 as the governor recommended.
All right, it's seconded by Representative Amix. There was
I know there's quite a big difference between the governors and the agency on these years. Pardon me not just immediately knowing what the differential was, but there's
regarding 2022, the big difference was the $287,000 for 8 FTEs on the food tax or food sales tax adjustment. I think that could be premature. Though.
I would agree with you, Mr. Chair, on the food sales tax. Just to be consistent with what we've done with everything else.
Right, and I agree with that, and that is my intention. But there is a flip side argument on that, and that is that any change that happens is going to probably require those 8 people in that funding. But that, of course, then does assume that a change happens.
You mean as in a buy down compared to 0?
Correct. Even if it goes to 3% or something like that, it's still going to require the additional staffing from revenue in order to make that work. Mm-hmm. I think Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And consistency, I guess, is you had said that this could be done again. Suggest that we leave it. I'm missing something here because we have a different.
Right. I prefer to take things out and then add them back if they're necessary, rather than carry them along and maybe they get skipped over because there's not a problem. I mean, if say for example that we left it in, no change happened. We didn't change the food sales tax one bit. Would we remember that, oh, by the way, there was $287,000 or $287,000. You need to go back in and take that out. Hope so. I think so, but I can't guarantee that. I know I would. I just don't want to count on it.
My suggestion is we leave it in.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a substitute, or I guess just an amendment to strike the revenue in dealing with that in 2022 and then also in 2023 striking it. But I do have a question. I don't remember the answer on line item number 6 on page 10 of that 1.1 million for taxpayer notification fund. I don't remember what that was about.
That was money that had been accidentally left out based on SB 13 that we passed last year. They accidentally left it out. The governor put it back in the budget, and that's appropriate. We did that.
I'd like to keep that in. Okay. Then I would just like to do the food sales tax administration costs as a motion to remove.
We can amend that to for review at omnibus. I would be A-okay with that one.
I would love to do that.
Second by Representative French. Discussion.
Just to clarify, we're going with the governor's budget, but with a note about the food sales tax people, or we're doing the opposite. We're stripping it out with a note to put it back in if the food sales tax is going to change. Okay, very good. I like that better.
That is correct. I apologize. That wasn't exasperation. I've got a splitting headache. I'm waiting for the Advil to take effect here. So that wasn't exasperation at you. That was, oh my gosh, my head. All right. Any further discussion?
On the amendment or on the budget in general?
On the amendment. Seeing none. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. That will be modified. Further discussion on the budget.
Mr. Chair, would you like to make a notation that you are wanting new license plates?
I do. The stickers are getting thick, but no, I'm not.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that you had that.
I think in our conversation, I think the agency made clear that that was kind of climbing up on their priority list too.
Okay.
Representative Amix.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to have a notation about the number of empty employee slots that are available right now?
We don't need to make a notation, but the chair does have to have that number in his head because I'm sure that question will arise. That number was 82. That's correct. Good catch, though. Good eye. That is something that would come up. Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, I asked about the assessor, county assessor, and I was wondering if we were going to get any information today in reference to the county assessor question I posed to.
Very good. Well, it just so happens that Chris is here. Are you prepared for that one? Excellent. All right. Well, welcome to committee, Mr. Harper.
Thank you. Yes, I'm David Harper, Director of Division of Property Evaluation and Division of Vehicles. And Chris asked me to come on. There may be a question on the appraisal process.
When an assessor is doing property valuations in a local government, who has authority over that assessor? Is it the city administrator or the state appraisal office?
It's a combination of the government or the county commissioners and the Division of Property Evaluation. Joint role there. Step one, we provide the list of people that have met the statutory requirements to be appointed county appraiser. The county actually makes the appointment for a 4-year term. We follow up and do annual audit reviews, compliance reviews, those type of things. Both of us have the authority to remove an appraiser from office for failure. Joint effort between us and
Sure that I can take back to my community any concerns in reference to lower property valuations or misuse of authority on property valuations and assessments. So help me understand who I would report that to if I'm not getting a satisfactory answer from my local elected leaders.
I would think you were reported to the Division of Property Evaluation. If it's more a personnel type thing or dealing with the public type thing, that would go to the commissioners. But if they're not following, if you believe they're not following the statutory requirements on how to appraise, assess property, that would start with us.
Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, our county commissioners run from this and we ask them who's responsible for them. So if they're responsible, they're sure not stepping up and saying it. They love to blame it on the appraisers and take no responsibility themselves. So just to let you know, that's where my county stands. Thank you.
I understand the county commission.
Thank you. Well, what's the qualifications for being a county assessor?
It's a combination of work experience and education. I think you need 120 hours of appraisal education and approximately 3 years experience. And then you also are required to hold an appraisal. It's in statute.
Your office make a determination if they meet those qualifications?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. All right. Thank you for being here. Discussion on the budget for the Department of Revenue as annotated. No. All right. All those in favor of passing up the Department of Revenue budget for 2022 and 2023 as annotated, say aye. Opposed, say nay. Very good. That will be the report to appropriations. Let's get to the Board of Tax Appeals, because I know that one's going to be a challenging.
Make a motion to concur with the governor's recommendation for the Board of Tax Appeals for FY 2022 and FY.
Oh, there we go. Representative Arnberger slow played it and it stayed alive as a motion. Excellent. All right. The only real sticking point, and it's not a sticking point, but the only concern that I really had was with regard to the IT manager position. I don't have an issue with that, but it did raise some additional questions that I think we can probably cover in the informational hearing, just in here a few minutes with OITS. Discussion, recommendations,
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Arnberger.
Thank you. My question is, if I'm reading it correctly on page 453, where it says supplemental and enhancement requests, the governor is recommending a higher salary than the agency, correct? In
Correct.
2023?
Correct. The agency requested just someone to run their IT for their hearings. The governor recommended perhaps someone to oversee a broader array of their IT needs. The difference between the two is exactly. It's the difference is about $20,000 a year.
Again, I think that's something too with appropriations when you guys discuss OITS, and I don't know, I feel like we're duplicating services.
That will be
Isn't that crazy?
discussion with OITS just today.
That's crazy that it just happened to work out like this.
You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes these plans come.
We are so lucky. You planned this so well. I don't have any problem with it. I just am trying to fully understand and just starting to wish that I went to school to be a IT manager.
Going field. All right. There's no further discussion. All those in favor of passing out the Board of Tax Appeals budget per the governor's recommendations for 2022 and 2023, say aye. Opposed, say nay. Very good. That will be the report to appropriations. And now let's look at the Pooled Money Investment Board. I saw no changes, no changes, no changes.
Or with the governor's recommendation on
Second by discussion. Exactly. It's time to process. That's on. Seeing none, then. I see some. Wagner.
I do want to say the PMIB people are very helpful in getting back to me on the questions about the question of rents versus, and they actually had some helpful information, and as far as looking at perhaps being more consistent with what other agencies do. But at any rate, it was they clarified some of it, and I really appreciate that. Just point of record.
Further discussion. All those in favor of passing out the PMIB budget for 2022-2023 as per the governor's recommendations, say aye. Opposed, say nay. Very good. That will be the report to appropriations. All right, let's get to work, folks. Today we'll have an informational briefing from the Department of Administration as well as OITS, and we have Mr. Stephen Wu to get us up to speed with the Department of Administration.
Good to see you again.
See you, Stephen.
I'll be speaking from the Department of Administration Budget Analysis. Before I get started, I want to recognize that Secretary D'Angela Burns-Wallace is with us in the audience today, as well as the Director Adam Proffitt from Division of the Budget. There are also several other directors from the Department of Administration that should be able to help assist this committee with any questions and information that they might have. So a couple of opening remarks on the Department of Administration. Their budget is a bit different from a lot of other agencies. As a service agency, a lot of DFA's budget is considered off budget. That refers to agencies paying DFA for services. We don't count those expenditures within this budget document because they're reflected as off budget items in this budget document and aren't reflected in the final total when we consider the operating budget for this agency, because that would count as double counting.
And if I could just interject, we find those numbers in each individual budget that is then paid to DFA, like when it comes under lease and rent and that sort of thing. That's where it's showing up, but we don't want to show it as an expense for them and a gain here, because otherwise we. At the end of the day. So sorry to interrupt, Stephen. Go ahead.
The other key thing to remember is that debt service accounts for a vast majority of this agency's budget. It's regularly 90% or more. And that's largely because the Department of Administration winds up, they're the ones that pay for the debt service payments for a lot of other agencies for the state of Kansas. So a lot of payments are funneled through the Department of Administration. So as a result, you'll see a large number for the debt service line. So in the first couple of pages in this document is an executive summary. It'll give you a very high-level overview of what the agency's budget looks like from year to year. I'm just going to go through the fiscal year 22 and 23 analysis in a bit more depth. I'd like to first direct the committee's attention to page 285. You'll see a table here that contains kind of like a ledger-style listing of the changes to the agency's budget since the legislature approved it last year. So for fiscal year 22, the agency requests about $216.9 million in on-budget expenditures. About $155.4 million of this comes from SGF. About $36.1 million of this comes from ELARF, the Extended Lottery Act Revenues Fund, and about $21.3 million of this comes from transfers from the State Highway Fund. This is a bit lower than what the legislature approved, about $4.6 million lower, and that is largely due to item number 2 there. If you look at the bottom of 285, you'll see that there is, apologies, not item number 2, item number 3. There is a decrease of about $4.6 million, and that is to account for the pension bonds that were issued for Capers last year. If you'll recall, the legislature issued up to $500 million in revenue bonds. The bill that passed at the time estimated an interest rate cap of 4.3%. When the Kansas Development Finance Authority went out and bonded, the final bonds came in at a lower interest rate, about 2.7%. So the debt service payments are a bit lower than what was estimated. So this difference is just it's just to account for that. The decrease is also due to some drops in employer contributions in Capers because of those bonds. You'll see those detailed in item number 4. The agency also has about $87.7 million off-budget expenditures. In general, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I imagine this committee has heard a lot of that from other agencies already. For 2022, I also want to jump to the governor's recommendation. You'll see that beginning on the bottom of page 286. And that's because there are a number of big items included within the governor's recommendation for D of A for 22. So the governor recommends about $1 billion in on-budget expenditures for 22. That's billion with a B. That includes about $947.8 million from SGF, about $36.1 million from ELARF, and about $21.3 million in transfers from the Highway Fund. This is a little bit bigger than what the agency requested, an increase of a little over $792.4 million. And that's due to the items listed, numbers 6 through 9. I'll just go through those one by one in succession. So item number 6, the governor's recommendation for a one-time $250 resident tax rebate is located in the D of A budget. The grand total for this is about $460 million. So this rebate would occur as a one-time payment to anyone that filed a 2020 tax return in 2021. The Office of the Governor in its submission indicates that its estimates are that it would affect about 1.2 million taxpayers. So anyone that pays the filed taxes for that year would get a $250 resident tax rebate. So that is that one large chunk of the increase. The other items, numbers 7 and 8, refer to paying off 2 bonds early. In total, if you combine those two, it's about $332.2 million. This is to pay off 2 bonds. The first is about $160.5 million for Series 2015A. So this series of bonds refers to a bundle of obligations, including a couple of refinance bonds. It includes some bonds related to debt service for dredging of the John Redmond Reservoir. It also includes debt service payments for the KU Medical Center Education Building. The scheduled payoff absent this would normally occur in 2035. So the governor's recommendation is just to pay this off early. Additionally, item number 8, there's about $171.8 million to pay off Series 2015G bonds. These bonds are referred to the debt service portion of the debt service for the state's portion of the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility on the K-State campus in Manhattan. The state's portion of this, part of that is included in these 2015G bonds. The governor's recommendation would just pay this off early instead of waiting until the final maturity date in, again, 2035. The call date on these bonds both occur in calendar year 23. Item number 9, by the numbers, is a little bit smaller than the others, but it has some organizational impact for this agency. The governor's recommendation also includes an increase of about $200,000 from SGF and 5 FTE positions for the Division of the Division of the Public Advocates within the Department of Administration. So there are a couple of executive orders that reorganized some offices within the Department of Administration. Executive Order 2127 created the Office of the Public Advocates, to which these offices are organized under. The executive order organized within the Department of Agency, organized within this Office of Public Advocates, the Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman, that was already in the DFA's budget, the TanCare Ombudsman, which is being transferred from KDADS, the Division of the Child Advocate, which was created by Executive Order 2128. The Division of the Child Advocate would provide oversight for the child welfare system, and that is largely what this additional funding is for salaries of the 5 personnel within this newly created division. I know I've gone through quite a bit on 22. Would ask the chair if he'd like for me to pause here for questions or jump on to 23.
Let's pause for just a moment. My major questions actually would probably best be addressed by the agency, so I can get to those here in a minute. Regarding line 8 there, or item number 8, the debt service payment on this bond is currently 17.4 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, so paying off both of those bonds early, the governor's recommendation number includes paying off the debt service in fiscal year 23, so paying off the next year's early, as well as the remaining balance on those two bonds. The debt service payments for 22 are already included within the U of A's budget.
Paying it off in 22. However, the bond payment currently for 22 is already baked into the budget. Okay, I'm with you now. That bill's kicking in. I'm ready to roll. Yes, I'm sorry. Representative.
Yes, Mr. Wu, on the bond payoffs, the number 7 and 8, what kind of interest rate are those things? What are we paying on the interest rate
I
currently?
believe the coupon rate for both of those, the majority of them are at 5%.
Representative Barnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. One, the Division of the Child Advocate, we currently have that position, right, due to executive order, correct? I think it's a great position. I didn't know, though, that it was housed in the Department of Administration. I was thinking it was going to be in the Attorney General's office. So I'm just clarifying that this person is in the Department of Administration.
Yeah, the Division of the Child Advocate is organized within the Office of Public Advocates, which is within the Department of Administration. A lot of several tiers.
Clearly. Yeah, that's what it feels like. And then for bond payments, do we pay them monthly, yearly? How does a bond payment work?
I think they, for the most part, occur twice a year, right? Yeah, about twice a year.
Okay. And then the other question I have, and this is just me thinking out loud, the number 6 for the resident tax rebate, why is it in the Department of Administration's budget, and wouldn't that want to be in the Department of Revenue's budget?
I can't speak to why the governor included it for the Department of Administration. I can, however, comment that a number of various policy items wind up being funneled through the Department of Administration. So essentially, it's included within this budget just to pay the expenses for that.
Okay.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Wu, this may be a question for those that represent the agency. The 2015A and the 2015G bonds, by paying those off, do you know what kind of revenue we're saving by paying those off early? What the amount of that would be moving into the 23, 24?
Yeah, you'll see a drop for those. Want to get to 23, but for the overall number, I'd have to get back to my computer. I can follow up with you immediately after.
Right, it may be better answered by someone else, but I just didn't know if you had that ready. Thank you.
And it's listed for 2015A. It shows the debt service payments of 27.8. If those are relatively stable throughout the payment of the bond, I think we could probably say that that's a 27.8 million and a 17.4 on the G. So I mean, it's not a lot to you and me, but overall, that's pretty nice money that we're saving. I like it.
Thank you.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So am I to believe then those payments together, we're going to save about $45 million?
That's my understanding, and we'll get clarification on that, but I think that's a pretty decent thumbnail sketch.
Final number would vary a little bit, but those are all interest payments you wouldn't have to
I have one more question, and Steven, I'm not looking for an answer now, but eventually, I ask this every year. Can you let us know what the debt per capita is? And I'm curious in 2022, 2023, and then current, and then with the governor's recommendation, what it would be.
I believe it's included in the Kansas Development Finance Authority debt study report that's issued every year. I can transmit that to the committee after.
Steven, who has time to read that?
Oh no. What does it say about me that I have?
I didn't even know that was even available. So
I'll send the information.
I would love to read that tonight. Thank you.
Representative Wagner.
Okay, Mr. Wu, got a couple questions from the 406-410 report. The question of rents, I'm impressed they're dropping, and from fiscal year 2020, the agency was at 859,000, which had dropped to 651, which dropped to 576. Are you shedding office space, or how is it that is happening? I mean, I'm impressed, but do you know the reason?
I think for the most clear answer, I think I'm going to defer to the agency on this, on the operational specifics.
Okay. I do have another question about the question of other contractual services jumped quite a lot from fiscal year 2021 to 22. I mean, they literally double. Was there some new contract? This is your 52900. Did they enter some contract with somebody that is costing $500,000 or so?
I'd have to follow up with you after, but with the number of offices within Department of Administration, that number looks like it is a lot because it's a lot of entities aggregated together. My understanding is that that's split across a number of different entities, and I can get you a more specific answer.
Okay, I mean, it's just a jump is what catches my hand. And then, of course, conversely, under repairing and servicing dropped quite a lot from 1.364 million down to 220,000. How was that achieved? Well, I don't, maybe. Maybe.
I'd have to follow.
Okay, they just stand out, and so they do bring me questions. But thank you.
All right, further questions regarding 2022 Department of Administration budget? Seeing none. Well, that was easy, Stephen. Let's go on to 2023.
Sure. You'll find the analysis for this on page 289. So for fiscal year 23, the agency requests about 215.1 million in on-budget expenditures. About 159 million of this comes from the state general fund. About 36.1 million of this comes from ELARF, and about 15.9 million of this comes from transfers from the highway fund. It's a bit lower than what the agency requested in 22, about 1.9 million lower. Most significant change is item number 2. Item number 2 refers to some variations in debt service payments. The agency's request goes up by a couple million in SGF and down by about 5.5 million in all other funds. And these are just due to variations in debt service payments on a number of bonds. You'll see those detailed out in the bottom of 289 and at the top of 290. The agency request also includes about 89.5 million in off-budget expenditures. And similar to with 22, I want to jump directly to the governor's recommendation for this year. You'll find that detailed on page 290. For fiscal year 23, the governor recommends 290.6 million in on-budget expenditures. 250.4 million of this comes from SGF, and 36.1 million of this comes from ELARF. Within the governor's recommendation for 23, there are included no transfers from the state highway fund. So the governor's recommendation is a bit higher than the agency's request in 23. It's about 75.5 million higher, and that's due to items 4 through 8. Again, similar, I'm going to go through them one by one. Item number 4, this should be a familiar topic to this committee by now. It refers to the Docking State Office Building. If you recall, last year, the legislature passed, within the appropriations bill that the legislature passed last year, included authority for D of A to go out and bond to up bond up to $120 million for the renovation of the Docking State Office Building. And there was some language included for the KDHE lab as well. Over the interim, the Joint Committee on State Building Construction, as well as the State Finance Council, ultimately approved of a plan to renovate Docking to a 3-story building. The governor's recommendation for this year, for 23, this $120 million, it would be to pay this off upfront instead of bonding it out over time. So instead of incurring debt over time, the governor's recommendation would make use of the surplus revenue received by the state and pay this off upfront. The agency has since indicated that they are still looking for federal funds to pay for this, and depending on the federal funds available that would be able to be applied to this, they would reduce the SGF amount for this. But the applications for those federal funds are pending, so we don't know the final number of available funds yet. Item number 5 is a reduction of about $15.9 million in transfer from the State Highway Fund and a corresponding increase in state general funds. This is the governor's recommendation to end extraordinary transfers from the Highway Fund to the Department of Administration. That $15.9 million from the Highway Fund was originally all towards debt service, and this recommendation would fund that from state general funds instead. The end result of that would be for the debt service payments within the Department of Administration, the majority of them would be paid out of SGF. There'd be a small portion of it paid out of ELARF, though there's a couple of papers bonds that some ELARF goes towards. But otherwise, SGF payments for the bonds that the D of A pays. Items 6 and 7 delete about $45.2 million for the 2 bond payoffs in 22, the 2015A and 2015G. And item number 8 is the governor's recommendation for the Office of the Public Advocates. There's a bit more of an increase in this year. The governor adds about 724,008 FTE positions. And this is largely because in 22, the payments for the expenditures for the CanCare Ombudsman are located in the KDAD's budget. Because of where we are in terms of the fiscal year, operationally, the governor decided to leave those there. But for 23, those expenditures are now moved to D of A. So for 23, the governor's recommendation, you'll see the expenditures for all 3 of those divisions within the Office of the Public Advocate. So that concludes my remarks on 23. Also want to point out that there is a lot of information remaining in the budget analysis. Pages 292 to 316 include a program by program analysis. You'll find some details on performance measures here. On page 317, you'll get an overview of the debt service summary within the governor's recommendation. And on page 319, you'll get an overview of the capital improvements budget for this agency. For the Department of Administration, just want to quickly note that the capital improvements, whereas in previous years, they have included some unique items year to year, for this budget submission for 22 and 23, the only capital projects included are State House renovations, rehab and repair, and debt service payments. No other items are included for capital improvements. So with that, would be happy to answer any questions if the committee has any. Otherwise, I would turn it over to the agency to speak.
All right. One moment before we do that. Under the Office of Public Advocates, the CanCare Ombudsman is currently located in
KDADS, the
KDADS, okay.
Disability Service.
Along with the Division of Child Advocate is also similarly in KDADS, or is that it currently in D of A?
The executive order puts it in D of A for 22. It's still with D of A in 23.
So this is an increase of $500,000 in the D of A for the Division of Child Advocate.
Yeah, that's correct.
And an addition of 5 FTEs. Okay, that might be a question for the agency. But the CanCare Ombudsman, the 3 FTEs, will see a reduction in KDAD's budget of $224,000 and 3 FTEs.
I haven't had a chance to follow up with them, but you should. If there is a reduction of, if they're moving it over, there should be a reduction of expenditures there correspond with the increase here.
Very good. That one. Now, regarding docking, last I heard, the 3-story model hadn't been approved by the by the legislature yet. Am I mistaken on that, or did I
The
miss a memo?
State Finance Council has approved.
Finance Council did? Okay,
I don't believe that action has been taken on docking yet. The Department of Administration has issued revised timelines for it. So things are moving along, but for now, concrete has been taken down.
I like some of this. It's disturbing. All right. Committee, any questions regarding 2023? Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stephen, I'm looking at fiscal year 2022 to 2023. I see the Division of Child Advocate. I see the Care Ombudsman. What about the Office of Long-Term Care Ombudsman? Is that not being moved, or is that already in the 2023 budget?
It's already in the Department of Administration's budget.
Okay. Okay. And then the docking building, that was a question I was going to have. So State Finance Council approved it. So, this, I guess the next question is the 120 million used for renovating? I know asbestos is a huge issue. Do we have a breakdown of what that 120 is going to pay for?
Yeah, I can dig up the estimates from last session.
And there,
with you after, but it includes the, I believe, asbestos abatement up front, as well as the planning and design, placement, and eventual construction.
so, and then they're making it 3 stories instead of, I don't know how many stories.
12.
12. So they have to take off that top tier. This is a wonderful budget. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome to committee Secretary Burns Wallace, who's wearing 2 hats today, but the first one she's wearing is the Department of Administration.
Good afternoon, committee. It is always a pleasure to join you and to talk about our budgets. I hope that your Advil has kicked in. It's an important
ready to
piece.
roll.
So a couple of things that I would like to highlight, and then I'll try to answer a few of the questions that have already come up, and then there may be more that I can answer. So as a reminder, the Department of Administration, we are a service agency, and we are made up of some very distinct units that do a lot of that admin on the backside. So think about, we are, I have a legal department, I have the Office of Procurement and Contracts for the state. We have our finance department for our agency, the Office of Accounts and Reports, that's responsible for all of the audit functions for the entire state. We have the state's print, mail, and surplus operations as a part of DFA. We have the Office of Facility and Property Management, which manages all of our buildings, leased and owned in various capacities. We have the Office of Personnel, which handles all of the overarching personnel functions for all state employees. Then we have our systems management office. And a few years back, we also, under an executive directive, received the state employee health plan as part of the Department of Administration. We are also the administrative homes for a few offices that are housed in D of A, but function almost independently of that set of operations. So the 9 offices I just talked about report directly to me, their directors. But the Division of Budget is technically in the Department of Administrative, and Adam Profit, who is here as that director, does not report to me, but the administrative home of the Division of Budget and its budget and all of those things show up under the Department of Administration. The Office of Long-Term Care Ombudsman functions the exact same way. That director does not report into the Secretary of Administration. We happen to be the administrative home of that unit, and they function independently, almost like a small cabinet agency per se. But they do not report into me. I make that point because the Division of Child Advocate, as it is being stood up under this executive order and this reconstruction of bringing in the 2 existing units and then the creation of the 3rd, functions the same way. It will function kind of independently. They do not report directly to the Secretary of Administration. They sit in the Department of Administration as an administrative home. I give that little backdrop only because just to think about just how kind of our depth and breadth of what we do. I talk about us as being the backbone of state government. We pay the bills. We make sure the lights are on. We handle all of the administrative functions to ensure that the agencies can then deliver the necessary services that they need to throughout the state. Over these last 2 years in particular, as you can imagine, dealing with the pandemic and all that we have faced, I have 2 units in particular that have been hands-on, knee-deep throughout. Our Office of Property and Facilities Management, they have kept our buildings open, our buildings clean, making sure day in and day out that those of us that needed to come in and out of the buildings could do so in a safe manner. So I just want to say that work has continued all the way through. But also our Office of Print, Mail, and Surplus. Throughout this time, think about all the different hybrid variations that we've continued to process over 10 million pieces of mail during that time, and making sure we were able to still get those to agencies, whether they were in or out or as they were moving and things of that nature. But also our print operation, understanding that our print operation is not just we're printing papers, we're printing signage for the Department of Transportation. We're printing the checks that go out from the Department of Revenue and things of that nature. It is a key and critical function that we did not stop at any point in time during this pandemic, and had to take certain steps to keep that group of our staff safe, but in that building every single day. And so those are the people that make up the Department of Administration. If you look at our budget, you can see, and as Stephen outlaid, big pieces of our budget for this year that are really different have to do with the enhancements that the governor has proposed. If you were to move those to the side, our budget almost is actually flat in terms of FTEs and pretty much all other aspects of operation. But because we do pay the bills, when initiatives like this come up, they do land in our budget. We pay the bond debt, so that's why it shows up here. For the Department of Revenue, the reason that those dollars didn't go to the Department of Revenue instead of the Department of Administration, we're the ones who actually cut the checks. And so instead of sticking it there, transferring it over from an administrative standpoint, because it's a straight rebate, we will get the data, and the data will be verified and run in partnership with the Department of Revenue. But our office is the one that actually cuts the checks direct out anyway, or makes the electronic payments or transfers. So it's more of an administrative step to not have to do what sometimes we do, where we literally are intertransferring money just to process a payment, for example. Docking was brought up. The decision was made on how to move forward with docking. That went through a long process, including the proviso last year that gave the authority for bonding, went through joint buildings, State Finance Council has approved, and we are moving forward with that project as well as with the state lab. In this case, the one thing about what's in this budget is that that dollar amount will change. And Director Profit actually mentioned this when he gave the original budget presentation. We are in the throes of finalizing what the federal dollars that can be applied. To do that, it's kind of like you have to do a lot of the bridging documents to finalize what's going in the building and what those steps are. And what are those necessary renovations. Then we get to look at allowability with the federal dollars. We'll be able to confirm an actual dollar amount of what's federally allowable. And then we'll be able to adjust the cash amount that is requested or needed in this budget. And I know that the division of budget is following that. Excuse me, trying to catch my breath. I know. So that will be an adjustment that we will see at a later date. The only thing that I do want to just mention also is this: if you look at our performance measures, just kind of like our budget, they may look a little bit different overall than some of the other agencies. And part of that is thinking about us as a service delivery agencies. So we might have a few more that are about output, right? Because our operations is actually built on what is the demand or the need of other agencies. And so we look at kind of try to service metrics. How many things are we processing? What's our process time? What's our uptime to make sure things are ready and available? Because those are the service level of agreements that really make the difference in terms of the services to the agencies so that they then can deliver services. So a lot of our metrics are in that number of items processed, number of individuals served, but you'll also see that we try to build in satisfaction responses, right? How satisfied are agencies with the services that are being delivered, efficiencies of our processes, how quickly can we get the numbers down on the days it takes to post a position or to get a position approved, so that we can start recruitment, right? So some of ours may look a little bit different just because of being a service agency, but we have them. We have lots of them because we pride ourselves. A piece of our motto is about excellent customer service every time with the Department of Administration. So with that, I think I've answered some of the questions, but I will stand for additional questions that I can try to answer.
Excellent, thank you. I do have a question regarding the Office of Public Advocates. When we're looking at the 23 budget, see a pretty big expansion there of adding total of 8 positions and $724,000. That doesn't look like a transfer from another agency. That looks like it's an increase. Am I mistaken in this? I know they don't answer to you, but
They don't. And so I'm going to ask Director Profit to speak directly to this because we actually were involved in the creation of the office or its projected development.
gotcha. Welcome to committee. And I know you don't answer to anybody.
My wife would beg to disagree. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Adam Profit, Director of the Budget. I don't have a sheet of paper in front of me, but for the Office of the Public Advocate, there's an incremental $700-something thousand. $500,000 of that is for the Division of the Child Advocate. The other $224,284 is a transfer from KDADS for the Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and there is a reduction in the KDADS budget to offset that. So it is to help stand up the Office of the Child Advocate. There are a few one director that has started already. I think they're going to try to hire 1 or 2 FTEs this fiscal year with a limited amount of funding. And then once we bridge up to full funding in fiscal 23, get the office fully stood up. Correct. To my knowledge, that the fiscal 23 number is the number. I mean, that's as far as we built out budgets as fiscal 23. I'm going to fall short of saying it will never grow, but I've not been involved in discussions that would see growth.
Committee questions for Secretary Burns Wallace or Adam Profit. Any of the above. This is your chance. Representative Varnberger.
I was raising my hand. It's a headache, isn't it? Yeah.
It's fine.
Secretary, thank you for being here. For the docking building, the 120 million, is that to fully renovate or is that just phase 1?
That's everything. And so if you all think back about 2 years, in January of 2020, we brought forth, it's a book. It was about this thick and it had various models and variations for where docking has evolved into. And along this 2-year journey, we have modified that to match onto the discussions, particularly in joint buildings where they looked at shorter buildings or different configurations of the buildings, having the lab in the building. So that 120, which was the dollar amount that was used in the proviso in last year's budget bill, was the amount to do a full renovation of the docking building if we kept it at the 12 stories, because that was one of the various options. They put it in the proviso at that level to make sure we had enough even though there was options that were shorter. So what we've done now that we actually have the full design, and now that we're doing the bridging document, we're able to finalize that dollar onto what the exact dollar amount. It won't be above 120, and that's the work we're trying to do quickly now so that we have that exact dollar amount for the shorter building, and we have the dollar amount to assess how much of federal dollars can cover some of that dollar amount. We anticipate close to 50% that the federal dollars will be allowable. But as soon as we know that, we will bring those numbers back to this committee, to the Senate Ways and Means, as well as to joint buildings.
Okay. And then kind of to go on the discussion of renting, I know I asked this to you when you were here earlier, and if you emailed it to me, I'm sorry, I did not see it.
Provided the rents, we provided the breakdown of all of our buildings that we own and rent, and we provided that breakdown by agency.
Okay. So if I can get that emailed again, I can't find it. I tried to search for it and I couldn't find it.
I don't know that we send it directly. We tend to send to the committee so that for their distribution. And so, but we will make sure we send it direct to you as well. Because we did provide that within probably a day or two. And we broke it down both ways. So we could see all, and you could see it by agency and where they were located. So if an agency was in 3 or 4 places, it started with like the name of the agency, and then it had their location, and the final column said leased or owned.
Okay. And then with COVID happening and with a lot of people, agencies allowing employees to work from home, how many jobs are you noticing? Lots of jobs that are permanent remote, and then is the state of Kansas then shrinking how many buildings we are owning, renting, so forth?
Well, we are not shrinking. We still continue to deliver the level of services and have the number of employees that we had before. Many of our offices are back into full swing. Some offices are using hybrid, but I can tell you before the pandemic, we were stretched on space to begin with, right? And so it has allowed us to be creative in some spaces in terms of how we use flex space, but it also is why we continue to have the conversation and the push for bringing docking back online, because we need more office space. And the pandemic showed us the need for even more flexible office space, to have more of that spacing, to be able to give people different configurations and things of that nature. So what I would say is that our workforce is still in very much full swing, that our agencies are back in the office, that we do have many hybrid configurations that are available, but we had that option in terms of remote work prior to the pandemic. It's always been it's not always, it has been a policy that's been on the books with the state for a number of years, and one that more agencies now understand how to use it effectively. And so you do see some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary, good to see you. Question when it goes back to rents, are you handling all of that in-house as far as the rent and availability and landlord business?
So for the state-owned spaces, yes, our Office of Facilities and Property Management, we have a whole team that looks at and looks at various configurations. Great example, and I don't know if I mentioned it the last time I was with you all, but and we'll mention it in my other hat again. But we recently finished the data center migration out of Landon, correct? So right now we are actually taking that space. The data center is now removed. There are 2 floors in Landon, the 7th and 8th floor, that the Office of Property and Facility Management are renovating and will flip over to become office space for an agency by this summer, right? So as we do that, we have a whole list of talking with agencies about what their needs are, what their future needs are, what type of configuration do they need, front facing offices, is this back room offices? And then we know our whole kind of list of what's available and what configurations. And so it is an ongoing process that we're always looking at and always helping agencies understand and navigate.
Just to follow up, how often do you all look at the market as far as price of rents?
On a regular basis. And part of that is because of agency needs. And sometimes when we identify that we don't have the space, we're trying to stay up on that. We have great relationships in the local markets, but we try to stay up on what's available in the region, what those rents are, always looking also comparative to our rent. Our rent runs a little bit differently than sometimes on the market, but it's also because our rent it includes full service. So it's everything, not just the building, it's the cleaning services, it's the snow and removal services, it's all of the other maintenance services that come with being in a state-owned office building. But we keep a very close watch on that, and are talking many times with our peers that are in that market and in this region, and with city of Topeka, and, downtown Topeka, all of the various entities that have an interest in this downtown region in particular, and the properties that are down here.
And I'm just, thank you, Mr. Chair. And the chairman always says this, but coming from the ranking person here, I appreciate when you come here. I mean, it's truly to be able to listen to you and just the way that you're on top of just everything.
I appreciate that. Hopefully the comments will continue once we get to IT. So there was one other question. There was a question about the savings on the bonds. I apologize. They're in our handout on the last page. This may help, and I just wanted to make sure I pointed it out. We have like a little 4-page handout. On that very back page, we show kind of the lifetime savings to the state for the early payoff. It's actually the 81 million. That's right there. So that's like if we were to pay out or continue the bonds at the current rate and pay all of the interest related to it, this is like the total lifetime savings of us paying off early. So I just wanted to make sure that we pull that out for you. Yes, it's SGF savings. Correct.
And Representative Wagner.
Yes, thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. I did want to, on your page 319, or not 319, on 318 of your budget analysis, you have the summary of outstanding bonds and such. Is that literally for the entire state? I mean, do you guys have all the bonds or within your department, or?
We do not. So we hold probably the majority of them. Okay. And so this is for the summary that would be a part of our packet would be for all the bond debt that is held by the Department of Administration. But there are pockets of other bond debt that is held by the state. This is the nighttime reading document that Stephen just mentioned and was going to share. The State of Kansas 2021 debt study, and this is done by KDFA. It actually has all of the state's bond debt in it and can provide that. And Jim is usually here. He had a conflict today and couldn't join us. And so if there are follow-up questions for them, we can get to them. This would show the full complement of the bond debt. What's in our report would only be the debt that's held by DFA, but we do hold the majority of it.
Very good. Another question or two. I'm just, you guys have sort of quite a portfolio of offices that you have. And I'm just trying to understand, like on page 307, the Office of the State Employee Health Benefits Program had basically zero expenditures until 2020. And then it goes up to 40 million. And, Office of Procurement and Contracts. I mean, there's a couple of these. I mean, the Office of Printing had like basically zero until fiscal year 2017. How is that? Did you not used to have it, or what?
Well, I'm not sure about the other ones. The State Employee Health Plan, as you remember, this was what is it? ERO? Is that the right letters? An executive reorganization. Thank you. Order. That ERO moved the State Employee Health Plan from KDHE to the Department of Administration. So that's why that one goes from zero up. And when they moved, if you remember, we took the whole budget. We just picked them up fiscally and moved them and plopped them dead into DFA.
Okay, then that I'm following now. Anyway, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
See it?
Yeah.
My. All right. Very good. Well, looking over the budget, there are some things in here that I'm really, really appreciate things like paying off bonds ahead of time, paying off docking before we bond it. Holy cow. There are some things I really like. There may be some modification necessary, but I really appreciate you being here, and I definitely appreciate the budget that you brought forth here. There's some very good stuff. Should I say, as always? All right. Let's go ahead and get up to speed, committee, on the OITS. And to get us there, we have analyst James Fisher. Oh, wait. Oh, I am sorry, James. One moment. I knew that Friends of Cedar Crest were going to be here, and I ignored it entirely. I apologize.
No worries. Thanks, Chairman Sutton. Jessica Lucas. I'm here today on behalf of the Friends of Cedar Crest Association, which I am currently the president of. Some of you have heard me in other committees talk about Friends of Cedar Crest. What brought me here today is a simple request that I'm hoping to get reestablished, not only for this upcoming year, but I hope that this isn't a request that has to continually be made, that it becomes part of how we handle our state government business every 4 years regarding the transition or potential transition that may be experienced. So I'm asking for $15,000 to be included in the budget for Cedar Crest, that Friends of Cedar Crest would be able to use in order to help transition the second and third floor of the property for a new family when they come in. I appreciate what the legislature did last year for us in regard to tax credits. Those are being used to help us fundraise to make improvements on the first floor, which are needed, and we appreciate the donations we've brought in. But this is separate, and it would be used for the first family's living quarters on the second and third floor, as well as any kitchenware items that are needed in the family kitchen.
All right. And you are requesting that for fiscal year 22, correct?
Correct. And my understanding is with transition budget, it's only utilized, obviously, if there is a transition. So if a change is made, then we would be able to receive $15,000 to take care of that.
And that committee, that is a pretty standard. I've only been here through 3 of the transitions, but that's always taken place then.
What is different, however, is that it has not always been an amount earmarked for Cedar Crest. And so that's what we want to make very clear, that there is $15,000 that is not part of a larger allocation that's split between, I think it was in the past, the governor's office and a couple other places, and then Cedar Crest gets left out, and that's how we end up with changes not being made that are appropriate to make.
So Ms. Lucas, you would be wanting that in what department then as a line item? Is that kind of what?
That would be the D of A transition budget earmarked for Cedar Crest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any more details of what you're actually going to do with the 15,000 other than just, the second and third floor didn't tell us much?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share that. So one thing that happens is a new family moves in, you have to provide new mattresses, linens, sheets, all of those things. There's also a sitting area that will need to be configured with furnishings. However, the family chooses to use that area. Some want to use it as a study. Some want to use it as a family gathering area. It kind of depends on who is living in the home. I will tell you, we've not been able to do that. The current governor has just kind of been making do with what is available, but we were able to replace mattresses with donor dollars. But I know from talking with many here in the building that they do feel it is a responsibility of the state to take care of towels, linens, kitchen items, household goods that a family should have when they move into the state residence. So the things for the public are funded through our organization from donor dollars, and our donors are not excited about purchasing mattresses and household goods for the family. They feel that that is also the state responsibility.
I have a leading question. Do you expect a new first family?
I just want to make sure that the budget reflects that transition when it does happen, whether that's this coming year or 4 years from now. Thank you.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica, do you anticipate that the first family would take those items with them when they leave? Is there an option for them to do that, or is it considered state property?
It is considered state property. I mean, if they bring something, obviously that's theirs to take, but things that we purchase, that being said, like with a mattress, the Friends of Cedar Crest Association would never have any objection if they wanted to take a mattress, because you typically aren't, reusing those. But it has been the practice that if it is purchased, it stays with the home.
So I guess my question would be, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to see a stockpile of old mattresses stored in the basement along with $10 million of computers. But
Just put it in.
I would like for us to consider possibly allowing first family that would be able to take mattresses and or sheets, pillows, whatever, those personal items. I mean, I wouldn't have a use for them. I'm not the first family. But at the same time, if they cared to donate them to a shelter, that's one thing. But I don't see us buying them and then throwing them away. I just don't think that makes good fiscal sense, Mr. Chairman. So I'd ask that when we do work this budget, we would consider allowing putting some kind of language that would allow the first family to retain mattresses. And if you need a list of what you would buy, I might suggest that we have a list of things that they might want to be able to.
And as to you not being a resident of Cedar Crest, the filing deadline is not passed.
Well, we had not purchased any for 12 years. So
All right, further questions, Jessica?
thanks everyone, and thanks for the consideration of that.
All right, James, sorry to get you all primed up there and leave you hanging, but welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is James Fisher. I am the managing IT analyst for KLRD. I didn't catch your meeting yesterday, so I don't know. I don't fully understand the reference to that previously today. So I am going to present the budget for the Office of Information Technology Services. With us today, we still have Secretary Burns Wallace, Secretary of the Administration, but also has the role of the Executive Branch Chief Information Technology Officer. Also with her is Brian Reeder, Director of Financial Services for OITS. You guys have seen a few of these documents now, but OITS, if you're not familiar, their primary function is to provide data and communication services to other state agencies, and they serve about 450 offices with 17,000 plus data communication users and 10,000 plus phone users. Like D of A, this budget has both on and off budget expenditures. I would like to just say ditto, but as a reminder, for that, the on-budget expenditures are primarily for like statewide IT infrastructure projects, and in these two fiscal years in particular, they're for what the agency is referred to as like an R&R fund for like network remediation and repair of networking equipment, and the off-budget expenditures.
That's not what R&R means at all.
Oh, rest and relaxation might help your headache. And the off-budget funds are expenditures that are primarily for services rendered to other state agencies. So payments OITS receives for their data centers of service, hosted email services, etc., that kind of thing. And again, that helps avoid the double counting of funds, since those are appearing in other budgets you guys have already heard. So this budget analysis, the first few pages are, again, some summary information. Pages 323 through 331 have that summary information of the agency, as well as some historical data on their various funds they use. But we're actually going to just jump right into the FY 2022 analysis, which begins on page 332. So again, you see that table that Stephen referenced in his, but the agency's revised request for fiscal year 2022 is $4.3 million in on-budget expenditures. All of that, except for $43,000, is SGF. The $43,000 is from a GIS contracting fee fund that the agency has. So this is the same as the FY 2022 approved amount, and these funds again will be used for that rehabilitation and repair of state networking equipment. And the governor did concur with the on-budget request. The revised request for FY 2022 also includes $51.5 million in off-budget expenditures. This is a 0.8% increase, or about $400,000 above the approved budget amount. And these are primarily driven by shifts in utilization of the agency's IT services, the elimination of the agency's shrinkage rate, elimination of rent for the land and state office building data center that they've exited, and you've heard a little bit about already. Would the chair like me to go through each of the about 12 items, or do you want me to just hit the highlights on those?
Yeah, let's go through these,
Okay,
just to make sure that we're being thorough here.
sure. Starting on page 333, item 2. So item 1 is just a $190 reappropriation. We're going to not dig into that too much. Item 2 is shows about $800,000 in an increase for salaries and wages. And this is due to the elimination of the agency's $1 million shrinkage rate. So that's also offset by a decrease in salaries. Effectively, they're not budgeting for open positions. Shrinkage is a negative spend. Now it's just gone. So it looks like $1 million increase, but it's a little more complicated than that, but that's not factually what's happening. Item 3 shows a $720 increase for additional utilization of the data center as a service offering, and some increased costs for operating the state's mainframe. Item 4 is a $700,000 increase for the agency's direct billed services program, which can be attributed to additional usage of its desktop as a service offering, and also a change in how the agency records certain expenditures for Microsoft that are not related to Office 365, and it's the platform that goes with that. Catch up with my notes here. Item 5 shows a $365,000 increase for implementation of IT projects for OITS. This would be for the implementation of a new Apptio module for Bill of IT Services. You all heard a bit about this when the Secretary provided a presentation in January. And also a new ServiceNow module. Apptio is a financial operational data platform, and ServiceNow is like an incident management platform, among other things. That's their ticketing software. I think this new module might be for some additional functionality, but I'll let the agency speak to that if they choose. Item 6 shows a $100,000 increase in contractual services related to Cisco SmartNet, which is a diagnosis and replacement, in the technical services for their network and telecom program, and it's a type of warranty for diagnosis and replacement of networking equipment. Item 7 shows a $66,000 increase in travel costs. Item 8 shows a $1.1 million decrease due to the cancellation of a consolidated identity access management solution, so an internal IT project. Item 9 shows a $301,000 decrease in rents, and this is for exiting the land and state office building data center. On page 334, you'll see item 10 is a $225,000 decrease, just due for a reduction in purchases of various computer equipment. Item 11 shows a $150,000 decrease in purchases of telecommunication equipment and network maintenance. And item 12 is a $625,000 decrease. And it's a catch-all for numerous fluctuations in their budget. As you can see with all of this, it's all off budget, and it's all a bunch of just movement and changes that kind of happens in a service agency like that. The revised request also includes 115 FTE, which is paid for all with off-budget funds. This is an increase of 1.8 FTE above the 2022 approved figure, and the agency had converted some part-time staff to full-time staff. The governor did concur with the off-budget request. The total request between the two, it's not really two requests, but the total is $55.8 million. Would the chair like me to stand for questions on 22 now or go on to 23?
Committee, do we have any questions so far? Don't see any.
Love that. Go ahead and
Boy,
skip
we won't
forward a
let it
bit.
happen again.
Actually, I'm not sure. We'll see. So we're going to jump to page 336 for the FY 2023 analysis. The agency is requesting $4.3 million in non-budget expenditures. Again, all of that is SGF except for $43,000 from the GIS contracting fee fund. This is the same as the FY 2022 revised request. And again, the funds would be used for the same purpose of that network remediation repair of equipment there. The governor did concur with the agency's on-budget request. The FY 2023 request also includes $51.5 million in off-budget expenditures. This is a 0.2% decrease, or a decrease of about $80,000 from the FY 2022 revised request. This is primarily driven by decreases in purchases for IT equipment for other state agencies, a change in the state contractual rate for operation of the Unisys data center, continued elimination of rent for exiting the land and state office building. Those decreases were offset by expenditures for a 3-year IT security software license renewal. Just kind of going into the items, I will say in my summary, I touched the decreases first because this is a decrease, but that table is organized with the increases first. So that first item you're going to see there is that software renewal. So this is an $800,000 increase for a 3-year renewal of an IT security product offered by Splunk. This was last renewed in FY 2020. Item number 2 is a $135,000 increase for salary and wage expenditures for 2 FTE within the hosted services program. Item 3 is a $50,000 increase for purchases of additional project management software licenses. Item 4 is a $415,000 decrease for less purchases or less anticipated purchases of IT equipment for other state agencies. On page 337, item 5 is a $250,000 decrease in payments to third-party vendors for operation of the Unisys data center and the state mainframe. Item 6 is a $200,000 decrease, which is a result of completing those previously mentioned IT projects. Item 7 is a $150,000 decrease in rent, again to the further exit of the land and state office building. And item 8 is about a $50,000 decrease due to the absence of a purchase for a passenger vehicle that occurred in FY 2022. The revised request also includes 117 FTE, all off-budget paid for with off-budget funds. Again, this is an increase in 2 FTE above the FY 2022 revised request, and the FTE will be housed in the agency's hosted services program to accommodate additional use of that program. And the governor did concur with this agency's recommendation. I can take questions on 23 now, or I can move forward a little bit.
Have any questions so far, committee? Representative Wagner.
Mr. Chairman, the question I have, again, this is from the 406 report, is just relating to other supplies and materials under commodities. Took a big drop from 16.3 million in 21 down to 5.9 and 5.5 in 22 and 23. I mean, given that it's supplies and materials, what on earth would have dropped that much, or move that number down so much?
Let me take a look at that report real quick here.
You can always get back to me if it's.
I think there might be this might be a question for the agency to answer here. There does look like to be a relatively similar shift with fees for other services. I do know they changed how they coded some of their stuff in their budget, so that might be captured there as well. You also might be able to see a comparison to the FY 2021 actuals in the budget analysis. In those summary pages, we didn't go over them, but there is a let me find that here real quick. So on page 335, there's an overview description of the changes from 21 to 22, but it doesn't show a change from 22 to 23 in that. So that might help go through the questions.
Okay, anyway, if you do have any light later to shed, I'd appreciate knowing.
Sure.
Other questions, committee? Yeah, I'd say so. All right. You said there was something you could progress with a little further?
Well, we actually pretty much reached the end of my remarks, unless you'd like me to go into the program analysis level. So the end of that document, just like the D of A one, or just summaries of the 8 individual programs with OITS. In those, you have their budgets for FY 2023 and also the performance measures that they submitted. So if you'd like me to go over some of those, I can, or we can conclude that now and let the agency come speak.
I think it would be just fine to have the agency go ahead and address us.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Work. All right. I'd like to welcome to committee Secretary Burns Wallace.
Hello, committee again. Thank you again for hearing our budget. And I was with you a few weeks ago talking about IT. You know, D of A is so much bigger, but the time that we spend in this IT space is probably twice as much, right? And part of that was when I came into the agency, there were a lot of questions around the finances, the rates, things of that nature. So what we have been working toward is consistency, right? And we don't always get it right, and we're not perfect, but we have worked towards consistency in rates, consistency in streamlining what we're doing, and making sure that agencies are understanding the services that are provided and what they're paying for. Consistency in the delivery of service, the consistency in that stabilization has been what we've been striving for. And I hope that you can see this in this budget. This budget is stable, right? We've gotten to a place where we've gotten these rates where they're not volatile. This budget isn't jumping and dancing all around. And I hope as you've gone through most of your budget hearings, you're hearing more consistency. There were years back where every agency that came in said OITS was horrible and we don't know what we're paying for. Have we fixed all the places? No, we're still working, but the agencies now have a good sense of what those services are and how we're delivering them, how we partner with them, and what that looks like. But we continue to work in that space. For our performance measures, it's very much like D of A. Being a service agencies, you'll see a lot of things that talk about uptime, right? Or that ability, that response time, because that is critical both in this IT space, but also being able to provide those services. If we have downtime, that agency has downtime. If that agency has downtime, that citizen can't get to their system, right? And there are pieces of the system that we control or that we monitor and maintain. And then there are pieces of the system that the agency does. So it is a partnership. We are not IT for everybody, for every aspect. We're the enterprise. We're kind of the foundation that everyone builds and sits on. And then on top of that is the agency work that is specific to what they are delivering, their applications, their systems, and they plug into that larger network. So with that, I think I'll stand for questions. I know that there were some that came up yesterday, so I don't want to put words in people's mouth, but I will gladly take questions around our agency's budget.
Excellent. We just funded an IT person for the Board of Tax Appeals, and that's really what there was a discussion around that yesterday that went on a bit, but can you address the situation with BOTA and how best to reconcile it?
So understand that about a third of our non-cabinet agencies actually do have IT staff in their agencies. And part of that is because these are typically the non-cabinet agencies that have more sophisticated IT systems. Years back, we were doing a lot of things with Excel files and Access and things of that nature. Now we need much more powerful systems that have the necessary security to protect the data and also have the ability for our citizens to get to what they need to in a certain way, right? That customer engagement, that management of that data, the contact management database. It's not a point and a click, and it's not just a website. There's a whole system that's driving behind that. As BOTA is looking at where it is, they are in the process of truly modernizing their system, the application for which they do their work, and it is moving to a much more complex level, which when we worked with them to understand where they were, where they wanted to go. I also have an information security officer that is assigned to all of the non-cabinet agencies. That individual will work with them to understand where they are and where they're headed. And it was upon that conversation that they said, we really believe we need that full-time person to be able to support our applications that our system sits on. That does not mean that OITS does not support this agency, but the system application that they are using needs that full-time support. They are still plugged into the network, so they use the network foundation. They still have O365, and we support that. And so there are various aspects. We are a infrastructure group for which every agency sits on top, right? And where BOTA is and where they need to be going, particularly for the nature of the data that they use and the size and the depth and breadth of who they service, they are moving to kind of that next level of complex IT systems. And there is a strong recommendation there to be able to have that IT individual that can be an expert in their space, an expert on their application that they're going to be building out. Yes, they will use a vendor to be a part of that, but having that internal expertise that is actually guiding and managing that and then coordinating across. Our security office will continue to work with them to make sure that they're hardening their environment and keeping the necessary things around it. As they work with that vendor to stand up their system, our networks teams, our infrastructure teams will work with them to make sure that they are talking to the necessary systems across the state. So it is still a partnership, but they really are at the stage in which they need that IT professional. And I think, as was reported yesterday, we talked about it, our teams worked across it. They have a new and a different and a growing level of need as they expand their services, and we are helping them as they move through that space. But again, about a third, maybe a little over a third of the smaller non-cabinet agencies do have IT professionals because of the nature of their systems and the data that they manage and control that are embedded with those agencies, but that also then partner with OITS. So I hope that helps a little piece of it. I know there might be more questions.
I knew that you would be able to set my mind at ease on that. Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, I must tell you, I've sat on this committee for years and never have I had anyone be able to explain the OITS budget as thoroughly as you have. Your agency in past was suspect for a long time in reference to fees and agency support and trials and tribulations, but I can share with you, I'm not an IT guy, but you make it very simple for me to follow. And I've read through the budget, and the only question I would have is the direct billed services went from 16 million to 5.9, and from 21 to 22. So there was a reduction there of $9 million.
So 21 was that interesting year. If I can walk you back, we were bringing down the landing data center and standing up Unisys. And 21 is the year where I actually had 2 environments that I had to support. And I actually had to come to you all and ask for additional money that year because I had to stand up both environments at the same time. We finished that transition. We now have just the Unisys environment. So 21 is that anomaly of a year where you see that because we literally were having at some point to pay for 2 environments. And so there was different levels of utilization and things that were going on in that 21 year. I can get my team to make sure we have a complete breakdown, but that's a short snippet of that. That was that year. Remember, the data center was stalled, right? And I had to keep the data center open, but then I had to stand up Unisys. And that means I had to pay for the Unisys environment, but we couldn't get ourselves out of landed. We fixed all that. And we now stand in one clean environment.
Point that out because of success in doing so, stabilization of the budget across there, the future reduction that I see, that's the kind of efficiencies many of us here like to see. But your explanation and how your operation is conducted is light years ahead of what I've had an opportunity or years prior. So I just want to say thank you to you and to your staff for kudos and a job well done.
I would echo that. Representative Burrows and I both took part in a number of fan dances and appropriations, and we're not attractive fan dancers. I think I think the reason that he was caught off guard is because we had a budget enhancement for a temporary project that was actually temporary, and that's shocking for probably all of us, not just your department, but across government. We often see enhancements that never go away, and when you say we solved the problem, holy cow, that's almost like a foreign language. Representative Wagner.
Yes, I do have a question on the special topics on the OITS rate changes for fiscal year 22 and 23. It looks like this is like the totality of the billing, was down 3%, and then for fiscal year 2023, it's up 8%. I take it, some of that could just be price changes. Some of it could just be changes of utilization, that they're either using more services or using less. Could you comment on that?
It's all of that and more, right? And so understanding that licenses continue to go up. And so there's some of that you'll see in there. Also utilization. As we moved into the data center, that utilization went up. But also once we moved the group from Landon into the data center, there are also other groups that moved into that data center. And so there's other aspects that impact that utilization, right? And then there are some actual kind of rate changes that are in there as well. While we've kept those very stable, there are some increases in some of those rate changes, which you will see. But our agency, it is direct bill. And so the reality of this is that we've been able to help agencies see, here is what your line of service is, here's your level of utilization, and then here's how much it costs. So even as those things start to grow, agencies can see one-to-one, yep, we increased here or we decreased here, and we actually now can see that decrease in our budget. The challenge is that with the really large agencies, sometimes those numbers go up a lot, and then with other ones, they go down. So that net shows, and it's not as clear if you see a agency breakdown. And I actually think in one of the things they show, just an example of some of the agency breakdown, you really see the real variation of what's really in there, because it's not just as clean as, oh, it went up or went down. Some went up and some went up disproportionately because of their needs and utilizations, and some went down, and it just kind of nets with an overall slight uptick.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, committee? Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here. I just noticed that your request for your Kansas Information Security Office is going up $800,000, but your FTEs are staying the same. Exactly what's the extra $800,000 for? You could tie it to some kind of a...
So I have to pull where so you're saying I'm sorry, sir, where are you looking?
It's on page 340, Kansas Information Security Office, spent $4,311,000 in 2022. That's the budget. And then for 2023, you're going up to $5.1 million.
In the Information Security Office. So most of what happens in our Information Security Office, there's two things that happen in that space. One is it's definitely not necessarily driven by staff. That is where a lot of our tools, those cybersecurity monitoring tools will sit. And so a lot of the variation you'll see in that budget is us bringing on tools, those tools for monitoring our logs, the tools for monitoring our firewalls. We're in the process of doing some upgrades in those spaces. So that is where you'll see some of that. But the other thing that is housed in our Information Security Office are our ISOs, those information security officers, and various agencies have those officers. And if an agency has that officer, that is a direct bill back to those agencies. And I have had in these last 2 and in the future fiscal years, an increase in the number of those dedicated information security officers. So for instance, Department of Administration, I did not have a dedicated ISO. As we walked into FY22, I asked to have a dedicated ISO for Department of Administration. So we're seeing that uptick. And again, because of it being direct bill, it is when that officer is added that is tied to that agency for their expense of that officer. So there's two things happening in that space. And so it doesn't show up necessarily the same as a clean FTE when we're doing that, because some of that is services. And then there are a lot of systems that are embedded in that cyberspace, the monitoring system, cybersecurity type of systems, and we house it in that part of the budget. Does that help?
That does help. Can you give me your opinion of how we're standing on our information security system? Are we okay, or are we still getting problems with maintaining security of our data?
I would say we are in a good place. We can always be better and stronger. And over this last year, we actually have taken a number of steps to harden our systems, including some of the work we did on firewalls. One of the, as my team just reminded me, one of the systems that we put in is a Splunk system. It allows us to look at our logs across a period of time to see if we're seeing any anomalies, right? Things of that nature. We've increased not only just our systems, we've actually increased our training. And we've done that on 2 levels, both at the executive level and with the frontline staff, where we have ongoing training and exercises. And that may sound, just like as one of those things that you add on, but in this security space, I can tell you, it's not always the ransomware attack that takes you down. It's that lack of basic cyber hygiene. It's the clicking on the wrong thing and downloading the wrong thing that actually gets through your system in a way that by the time you find it, it's all throughout. So we have actually doubled down in those resources across the agency in terms of that training, having that frontline technical staff meet on a regular basis about what's going on in industry, what things do we need to be paying attention to. So we are overall trying to harden our environment. We are in a really good place. We get good ratings when it comes to like the national ratings. Are we in the best place? Are we where we want to be? No. And that's some of the work that we just finished with the governor's task force on cybersecurity. While it was a holistic conversation that incorporated public and private, state and local, higher ed, health, and all of that, there are a number of aspects in there that are directly impacting the state. And we're looking at those recommendations to see which ones we can leverage and do some work with kind of short term to have some really strong gains. So are we in a good place? Yes. Are we where I want us to be? Not yet.
Excellent answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Great to have you here. Thank you for being here. And I think that wraps everything up for the day. Committee, looking at tomorrow, barring Snowmageddon 2. Because the first one was so impressive. Tomorrow we'll be making our recommendations for the Department of Budget, the Department of Administration. Oh, Adam already left, and the Department of Budget, Division of Budget, as well as OITS. And we'll be hearing the budgets for the Board of Examiners of Optometry and the Department of Labor. So that should be nice and simple. So until that time, we are adjourned.